Chinese President Xi Jinping recently in a meeting with security and defense officials said that Beijing must prepare for the worst situations such as inevitable conflict. According to experts, this partially reflects the current tension between the US and China, which can explode into a collision at any time. Relations between two countries with the largest economies and most powerful militaries in the world are at a sensitive stage. Conflicts could break out if confrontations are not contained, especially in the Taiwan Strait and the South China Sea corridor. The two are said to be building national power on economic, diplomatic, and military to be ready for future wars. This building process is increasingly structured and becomes systemic. President Xi Jinping's speech reflected a long-standing situation, and certainly any Chinese leader would deliver the same message. According to experts, it's too early to call Mr. Xi's statement as a warning of impending conflict, but it certainly reflects a growing confidence that the Chinese military is always ready to go to war and win. With a huge economy, defense industry, especially the production of conventional weapons, on a very large scale, China is said to be always ready for local conflicts on a small scale in the region. Some experts said that President Xi Jinping's request for the military to dare to fight represents a significant change compared to previous leaders. This is as an affirmation. China's power is now different. They no longer have to hide in front of countries with outstanding capabilities in the region. They also need to overcome the mentality that Chinese military is weak in weapons and fighting spirit. These problems became apparent after the border war in 1979. Before 2012, when Mr. Xi came to power, few leaders mentioned this phrase. Xi added in his recent speech, "The military can fight and win. This can prove the strength of a strong army." Since taking power in 2012, Mr. Xi has carried out comprehensive military reforms in terms of operational structure and levels of command. He imprisoned two vice-chairmen of the Central Military Commission, Xu Kaihao and Wang Boxiong. He moved the army, which instead of sharing the command structure with the government, is now completely under the leadership of the Central Military Commission, headed by the chairman of the Central Military Commission, who was also the General Secretary. He also fiercely removed hundreds of other high-ranking generals, whom he believed were guilty of corruption and disloyalty. For example, Senior Lieutenant General Shang Yang and Chief of the General Staff Fang Fenghu. Some argue that the Chinese leaders still do not really believe in the ability of the military because since the 1979 they have not encountered a worthy opponent. Therefore, the spirit of determination, daring to fight, and the ability to win are questioned if there is a conflict on the Korean Peninsula, the Taiwan Strait, or the South China Sea corridor. Several recent events also support this view. For example, in the border conflict with India in 2020, although China only lost 2 to 3 soldiers, while India lost about 20 soldiers. China's strength is doubtful because they used greater numbers. In addition, reports also show that the physical strength of Chinese soldiers in the high mountains is not guaranteed. Even on social media, videos scattered showing Chinese soldiers crying as they were sent to the harsh border with India. Some Chinese legislators believe that the education and training system of the People's Liberation Army needs to be reformed, emphasizing the skills of training commanders and the staff officers, especially in the face of challenges such as real wars in the future. The Chinese government recently reported that it has increased the defense budget by 7.2% in 2023. Thus, in the past decade, China's defense budget has doubled. The Chinese People's Liberation Army (PLA) aims to build the most modern army in the world, strong in equipment, facilities, and defense industry. Today, they have the largest or second largest navy in the world by the number of warships. They have been doing this for over 20 years. The annual defense budget increased by an average of nearly 15% before the global financial crisis, doubling every 5 years. Since 2009, real growth in PLA budgets has halved as China's economic growth slowed. Resources devoted to the military as a percentage of China's GDP have remained unchanged since the 1990s. In China, spending on police and other security services is even larger than spending on defense. The reason is they have a defense surveillance network. Their security human resources needs a huge amount of budget to maintain operation. China's National People's Congress recently approved a number of amendments to military-related laws. For example, regulations governing reserve force management and strengthening the military's criminal law in wartime. Since 1977, China has revised or enacted at least 8 new national defense bills. Most are aimed at improving the ability to wage a protracted war or increasing the applications of science and technology in weapons production, especially artificial intelligence. In a speech in March, the Chinese president had touched rules aimed at the West. He said, Western countries led by the United States have implemented a strategy of containment, encirclement, and suppression in all directions against us. This presents serious, unprecedented challenges to the development of our country. Earlier in the State of the Union Address 2023, U.S. President Joe Biden named China and its supreme leaders as adversaries. President Joe Biden mentioned Xi twice. The White House leader affirmed that victory in the competition with China is something that must be achieved through the unity of all. All of these moves suggest that China may be actually building up its capabilities to be ready if there is a war in the region or confrontation with the West. Some people think that the views of the Chinese president on the Taiwan issue should be taken seriously, especially through public statements. Taiwan is still a territory China aspires to reunify. In the history of Chinese feudal dynasty, every monarch wanted to expand his territory. This is considered one of the most important legacy that they left for future generations. The federal message of the President of the United States has always been noticed by the people and leaders around the world. The Chinese president and other officials certainly took Biden's speech very seriously, looking for signs of Washington's policy toward Beijing. In a series of conflicts between the two countries today, the Taiwan issue is always the main focus. U.S. Assistant Secretary of Defense for Asia and the Pacific, Ellie Ratner, told the Senate in December 2021. In addition to providing weapons and defense capabilities to Taiwan, the Department of National Defense remains committed to maintaining the capacity of the United States in the Asia region to resist the use of force or other forms of coercion that may endanger the security of the people of Taiwan. Let me be clear, this is very high priority. China is the most serious challenge. Contingencies involving Taiwan are scenarios we have to watch out for in advance. We are updating our strategy, doing it regularly to modernize our ability to respond to any difficult situation. According to experts, if Taiwan or the United States ignores China's red line, Beijing will quickly conduct pressure actions to force the other side to return to the original status quo. If not, the use of force would be an option to consider. For example, to oppose high-level visits by foreign leaders to Taiwan, the Chinese military often conducts massive exercises to intimidate. This exercise could turn into an actual attack if the tense situation remains stalemate. Therefore, U.S. policymakers should take risks seriously. This has been true for decades and will probably remain true for the foreseeable future. Today, China, Taiwan, and the United States are closer to conflict than ever since the 1970s. The PLA's growing combat readiness may make China strong enough to take the risks. Experts said that until 2027, China won't be able to unify Taiwan by a war, but perhaps the milestone is much closer. China's president is in his third term. At the end of this term, he will be nearly 75 years old. During the previous term, he incorporated Xi Jinping's thought into the party's constitution, bringing his image to par with leader Mao Zedong and surpassing reformer Deng Xiaoping. There is an opinion that in order to comparable to the monarchs of the past, such as Queen Shi Huang, the necessary task for the current Chinese leader is to unify Taiwan. In May and early June, U.S. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin made a series of visits to Asia. He stopped in Japan, Singapore, and India. The focus of the trip was on Asia security issues amid increasing pressure from China. He affirmed that despite the complicated war in Ukraine, the United States does not ignore Asia issues. At the end of May, Mr. Austin visited Japan, then to Singapore for the Shangri-La Defense Dialogue, and finally to India, before holding bilateral talks with his Japanese counterpart Yasukazu Hamada in Tokyo. Mr. Austin visited the U.S. Aquakuni Air Base in Yamaguchi in western Japan. He told soldiers, "Shoulder to shoulder, together we show teamwork to protect common values." In an interview with Nikkei later, Mr. Austin explained why he chose Japan as his first destination after taking office in January 2021. He said, "Since that trip to Japan, I have returned regularly to the Indo-Pacific to affirm my profound belief that no region is more important than Asia in the world in the 21st century. I have great confidence in the ability of our two countries to handle any security challenges that arise in the region. Together, we stand against practices that flout international law and trample on global values and norms. We will not allow hooliganism and aggression to continue in the seas of Asia. We will let them understand that we never back down." Referring to Japan's sharp increase in defense spending from 2024, Mr. Austin continued, "Tokyo's sharp increase in defense spending and the purchase of counter-attack weapons such as long-range missiles and warplanes combat will help strengthen our deterrence to maintain a free and open Indo-Pacific while maintaining the rules-based international order that helps ensure for all to grow together towards prosperity." He also announced that the U.S. military will make some adjustments to improve the command and control system to enhance the quick responsibility of the two countries' militaries, especially to threats from China and North Korea. On the Taiwan issue, the most thorny thing in U.S.-China relations today, he said, "I want to share a clear view that we are opposed to unilateral changes regarding the status quo of the archipelago Taiwan. China should not and the United States oppose the use of force to resolve disagreements. I believe that not a single Asian country is in favor of a violent solution." Even so, Mr. Austin acknowledged conflict with China may be inevitable, but it is not happening soon. He continued, "The United States will continue to monitor China's aggressive actions, working with allies and partners. We will do everything to ensure peace and stability in the Taiwan Strait in particular and in the Asia region in general." Over the past time, the U.S. government has made adjustments in relations with Taiwan, such as using direct funds to buy ammunition or weapons, meaning the transfer process to the island would be much faster. Referring to this issue, Mr. Austin said, "We continue to fulfill our commitments under the Taiwan Relations Act of 1979, but we reiterate our policy that we do not support Taiwan moving forward to independence." Also, in the interview with Nikkei, Mr. Austin called on China to resume negotiations between top defense officials of two countries. He said, "It is extremely important that leaders maintain an open line of communication, even when we disagree on many different issues. Although China has repeatedly refused to communicate, the United States remains committed to pursuing negotiations and will work persistently to establish communication channels in urgent situations." In early June, Defense Minister Austin and his Chinese counterpart Li Shangfu shook hands at the Shangri-La Conference. This short meeting in Singapore did not satisfy the U.S. Earlier, the Pentagon announced that it had worked with China to hold an official meeting, but was refused. China expressed a great discontent with the United States after the spy balloon was shot down. The U.S. claims the spy balloon entered its airspace illegally, while on the other side, China said Washington exaggerates the issue and wants to smear them. Explaining the reason for refusing high-level dialogue, a Chinese foreign ministry spokesman said that the U.S. is maintaining a two-pronged policy. One wants to talk, on the one hand, strengthening isolation, sending warships and equipment to Asia, especially around the Taiwan Strait. The U.S. also increased arms supplies to Taiwan. All of these moves pose a threat to China, to peace and stability in Asia. Therefore, Beijing must always prepare for the worst-case scenario, including a war or conflict. The current tension between the US and China is perhaps the most serious since two countries re-established diplomatic relations in 1972. The recent warship confrontation in the Taiwan Strait shows that a clash can happen if two sides do not restrain and have emergency communication channels to resolve the crisis. If a conflict breaks out, even if it is only locally on a small scale, it will also have extremely negative impacts on Asia and globally at a time when the world is as insecure now. Our program has come to an end now. Thanks for your attention and see you next time.